everybody? This is Table Talks, episode 3. We are going to be talking about advanced GMing. I'm Fox, and always joining me is the wonderful, majestical unicorn known as Corruption Points. How's it going, buddy?
Hi, everybody.
What'd you get up to this weekend?
This weekend, I played Death Watch, which was the Space Marine variant of Dark Heresy.
Oh yeah, how did that go?
It was good. I don't think it was as great as it could have been, but that's another story for another day.
That's another story for another day. All right, so let's get back into it. Advanced GMing. We talked a bit about the basics and first time, and then this episode we're going to kind of discuss. I guess the way you described it is, this kind of thing isn't a living document, or it is a living document. It's not by the books. So first thing I guess we're going to talk about is dealing with animosity at the table. We kind of briefly went into it before we realized that we should probably talk about this next episode. But yeah, how do you handle people that are bringing outside conflict into the game, or people getting frustrated with each other with someone else's actions?
So allow me to begin. There are thousands of references and resources for dealing with problem players, whether it's people who are too gregarious or players that like to rules lawyer and things like that. And there are literally thousands, and some of them are unbelievably excellent. That's not really what we're going to be approaching here today. What I want to talk about is at the table if you have out-of-game conflict being brought into the game. Right, and I don't know if this has happened as often as it has happened with me. I often play with my closest friends. Those are the games I play. Those are the people I play with, and very often we'll have some sort of tension out of the game that leaks into the game. And as a GM, I'm often the one being the GM. It's a matter of recognizing when the fight becomes not a conflict in the game, nothing to do with the game, but two people arguing, right? Not only does that break immersion, it breaks the game, it breaks the characters, but it really makes it a lot less entertaining, a lot less fun for everyone at the table. That tension starts to rise, and you realize that it's coming to a head, and it's going to be a point where nothing will go well from here. And as GMs, we need to recognize this and know how to deal with it, and that's where I'd like to start today.
All right. So, do you have a particular story or time that something like this has happened that you can kind of tell us, or?
I have a couple. I've been thinking about which I'd like to use first and foremost. I'll go with. So when I was very very young. I'll do this first, right? I was a very young player. I was a player. I was not the GM. And I was getting rather annoyed at another player because he kept rolling his dice. He decided that he was going to roll his dice until he hit a 20, right? So he did this like 70 to 80 times until he rolled a 20. And I told him, if you roll that dice one more time, I'm going to throw this box at you. And he did it one more time, and I threw a box at him. And it hit him like roughly in the face area, and he just got super upset and left the table, right? So let me bring this up to problem number one. At the point of which I was a player, and I was incredibly young at this point. At the point of which my GM saw two players like building a conflict where one was instigating and the other was overreacting, should have stepped in, and that the entire situation could have been prevented. Right?
Right.
It's a matter of recognizing when it's going to be too bad and stopping it.
Wait, so the kid was just rolling dice, and if he missed, he just kept rolling and rolling and rolling on the same
Rolling
thing?
and rolling and rolling, right? And obviously, this sounds so dumb now that I think about it, right? Like, well, how could I possibly be upset about this? But at the time, I was just like super duper mad.
Yeah, definitely. The one story I have was actually my recent game with Dark Heresy, and that was really the only time I've seen conflict get that bad, and there was nothing I could do. And not only that, but there were some prior events that that had me mad as well, and it just ended up with me just leaving. Like I was legit just so mad. But I've always handled conflict again. It's always playing with your personal friends. That's the best way to do it. I mean, if you don't have any friends, or you don't have any friends interested, and you're going to a store and doing a pickup game with certain people, that's a risk you gotta take. Sometimes you're going to come across people you don't want to play with. But I mean, it's a matter of just not avoiding. Just you you do have to recognize it and stuff like that. And if people just seem like they're just taking things way too personally or whatever, there's still only so much you can do. If the people are, shitty or whatever, there's only so much you can do.
So this is less of a matter of trying to corral your players or trying to fit personalities into a game. This is more about recognizing when things are going too far and how do you stop it, right? Very recently, I was playing a game with some players, and there was a moment where there was a skull servitor, right? We're playing rogue trader. There was a skull servitor flashing a light bulb into fog, right? The one player said that this would give away our position because enemies would see the light through the fog and know where we were. The second player said that's silly. The fog will refract the light and therefore bounce back to us, making us more hidden. They argued about this for roughly 3 minutes before it became an actual argument about who was wrong. This So I was again not the GM, but it's sort of a matter of like you realize this argument is no longer about whether or not light and fog refract in a certain way to make things harder. It has everything to do with two players arguing with each other. So how do you prevent that as a GM? It's a matter of seeing this actions going on, seeing this conflict start to arise, and bringing it back to the table. That's my first and foremost biggest piece of advice, right? Mm-hmm. Take whatever they're talking about and bring it back to the table.
You know what I personally would have done with that situation? I've been like, the enemies found you because you're screaming at each other.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's both the players' faults. I mean, that's something that you can do. I mean, if that was the case, the way I'd probably bring it back to the table is just like, at this point you're spending way too much time. Like you need to decide if you're going to do it or not. You know what I mean?
That's exactly it. As a GM, you are the moderator of this entirety. There's a reason that GMs exist, and half of them is to make sure the game keeps going. You need to bring this back to mechanics if you realize that it's straying away from mechanics, right? Instead of letting the players argue for another 20 to 30 minutes about who's right and who's wrong, reaching escalation to the point where neither of them are having fun and everyone else is out of the game. We just say, all right, I'm the GM, I'm going to make a judgment call, and then move on from there. You need to not only realize that this argument is not progressive or beneficial, but actively detrimenting the fun of your game. And that's the point. That's the point of being a GM. It's knowing that when to move on and knowing when to let things happen. I'm all about player conflict. I love when players argue about various motivations, but you need to have a certain lens that allows you to see when it's not about the game anymore and it is about the people.
Right. And I again, a creative thing you can do as a GM is you can also, hinder the party or whatever, because I mean there's two members. What was the rest of the party doing? Kind of just sitting there, kind of like twiddling their thumbs, like
sitting around,
just
right?
Because when the argument gets so heated up, you're just kind of like, I don't want to step in. But one thing you could say is, oh, you guys were screaming like idiots, and the enemy found you, and now it's an encounter when you could have had the advantage, kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly, right? You're wasting time. This time is not in a stasis. This time is happening.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question then. How do you deal with players that are trying to cause conflict with the GM then? Can I go ahead and I say this rule, because this is my absolute number one biggest pet peeve, is when we start a game, I always say cell phones off. Because there's nothing worse than a player on their phone and I'm like trying to describe a story, and then they're like, okay, what should we do, blah blah, and then that one person stops and says, wait, what's going on? It's like, well, if you weren't on your phone, it's going to be a problem. That was actually one of the main causes of probably why I was so fed up, because there was this one person who was just stuck to their phone, and every 5 minutes they kept asking what was going on, and it's even at the point where people are like, oh, I have dice apps. I'm like, nope, I have a bag of dice. That's not an excuse. You can't do that, kind of thing. So I mean, that's the main way you can start conflict with me, is if you're trying to argue with that fact, because I'm everyone's trying to sit around. We're all gathered to play a game, not so you can go on Facebook and talk to your friends about how you're playing a game.
Now let me ask you something. Right. If there's a player who needs to do homework while they're playing the game, would you allow that?
I mean,
is there? I guess let me extrapolate that into a more general question. Is there a section of things that are allowed at the table for like your life, and there's a section of things that are allowed at your table for distraction.
Right. Well, that's. I mean, it all depends on the friend and how they handle it, type thing. Because if someone's glued to their cell phone, that's kind of their thing. But if somebody respects the game enough and stuff like that, and they can jump in and out, and I'm comfortable with them. I mean, it's tough though. It's tough because the players I've encountered have always just been, if that's a thing, during a fight encounter or something, they'll they'll go do whatever they need to do or whatever, and if it's during a role playing encounter, they want to pay attention and stuff like that, because encounters just like we can just yell, "Oh, you got hit," or "Okay, that's cool." It's like, or you want to make a dodge roll? Yeah, sure, kind of thing. They don't have to be super involved, but of course, it's something I try to avoid. If someone's like, if it's finals week, like Blood Bowl has been kind of crazy with the finals week and all that stuff, and it's just like, just cancel the game and just do it next week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I don't like to babysit. I think I have a certain level of respect with my players as they are my friends. That when they come to the table, they'll know like what everyone expects from them, what they as peers they expect from each other. You know what I mean? I don't think that ever I would need to take someone's stuff away. I'll yell at people. I'll yell at people all day. If if like I'll shame them into putting away their DSs or their laptops, but I don't think that I don't want to babysit you, and I don't want you to be the kind of player that needs to be babysat. And that's really all there is to it. You're going to come to this game and you're going to get the amount of enjoyment out of it that you'd like to get out of it. And if you're going to be distracted during it, you're just not going to enjoy it as much. And while that is a sad conclusion, that's the one that the players made for themselves. I have, at any given time, 3 to 4 other players who are fully involved, fully wrapped up, and I have no problem talking to them. It's very much a matter of you're going to get as much enjoyment out of this as you want.
Yep. And I think avoiding conflict with players as the GM can be easily set when you state your rules. Like, I'm a pretty chill guy. I'm not super into like over the top. Like World of Warcraft number crunching when it comes to like my combat and my stuff like that. But I set my rules pretty down. I'm pretty down early. Unless they're expecting a child or there's like an emergency or something like that. I say cell phones off for 2 hours. If we're gonna get food, we're gonna get food ahead of time. You know what I mean? We're not gonna, And I always call the game. I say we're gonna start rolling dice an hour before we actually start rolling dice. You know what I mean? So, I think just stating your rules and the fact that if they start, crap from there is just kind of like, well, I told you the rules, man. I don't know what to say. If you can't even, respect that, then why would I ever invite you back?
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a certain ground rules that need to be laid on the table. I also, again, playing devil's advocate, because I've been a player and I've been involved in other things, I've been disinterested, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain level of GM-ness that needs to come in reaching out to players as well, right? And I firmly believe that everything is teamwork in this hobby. Everything is collaborative. Everything is one to the other. So if you have a GM who just does not at all engage a player and they find themselves getting distracted, that's a whole nother story, and so I'm never going to say like one is wrong and the other is right. As a GM, I'm biased. But I think that there needs to be that reach, and if there is a reach made and they're just not grabbing it, again, I have 3 to 4 other players who would love to get into this.
Yeah, it's again, I guess advanced GMing, because versus the beginner GMing, it was for a lot of people that are scared at this point. It's just like, you're the GM, just like your word is law. Kind of thing. Yeah, I have players that can replace. Oh, you don't want me to be your GM? Well, good luck, assembling players. Considering you're just kind of the one person who's not having a good time. Meanwhile the 2-3 other players are totally having a blast, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of run off course. We're talking about players arguing with each other, but now it's conflict with the GM, and we got like this paragraph of stuff, just like, yeah, but players shouldn't be like this. But I guess bringing it back, I mean. Is there anything else you would suggest to GMs who possibly deal with 2 people that are arguing all the time, or
Yeah.
2 people that probably don't like each other who are about to come into a game?
Yeah, I have a firm policy set at my table, and my table is literally my table. It's the table that I own in the house that I live in, right? And that is, I don't care who starts it. I don't care what happens. I don't care what is said. But if any player at any time insults another player in like a vicious or malicious way, they can leave, and that's all there is to it. And that's something that you need to understand as a GM is that you have that power. You know what I mean? This is the game that you're running to make sure that your players and your friends, in my case, are having a good time. If any of my personal friends were to ever insult anyone else at any time, I would ask them to stand up from the table. We would talk outside, and they could apologize or leave. And that's just the way it is.
Right. So yeah, basically lay down the law, carry a hammer, and don't be afraid to crack skulls. So something that we actually kind of thought up of before the show begins. Rewarding players beyond XP. Did you want me to take this? And,
Yeah, jump ahead. I think that's a good idea.
all right. So ever since I've been GMing since like 14 or 16. Yeah, but I didn't start doing the system till I was about 16. I come up with an imaginary currency that I inform players. I don't tell them how much they have, and they're constantly gaining throughout my games. I call them brownie points, and basically what this means is they are points for getting good role playing. They are points for getting for helping other players, going beyond, and there are extra points. If somebody brings beer or something like that, that's also a thing. Just very kind gestures, making the game a bit more interesting, making the game more enjoyable. So as I accumulate these brownie points, which aren't actually points, they're just invisible numbers in my head that I spend without their consent. I basically use this opportunity to listen to players. So I'll use Toxic as an example because he's the most recent situation. Is during our second game, he killed his first Chaos monster, even though it kind of just stood there and let him execute it. His character's delusional. That's his hindrance in Savage World. So he's all of a sudden like, oh man, I'm gonna be the greatest witch hunter of all time. Then insert Pokemon theme song. He even went to a store, bought all the attire to be a witch hunter, and walked out. And I'm like, okay, so he wants to be a witch hunter. He's doing it for his character. He's doing his hindrance. And I was like, okay, so this is what I'm gonna do. So before the next game, there's a family of witch hunters in the Warhammer setting that I kind of use called the Von Brunner family. They're family of witch hunters, and they actually worked with them in the first campaign. They were kind of involved. Corruption Points even remembers them because he was in the first game. But they sent him a letter saying, "Hey, how would we heard about what you did? How would you like to join the family?" And he didn't get any extra stats or anything like that. Actually, I gave him and Derix a minor knowledge, skill, and chaos, but that's like a whole other thing. But I gave him a badge, like a family crest or family badge, that he can wave around since they're a fairly known family and stuff like that. It's not going to devastate the game. It'll still make the game more interesting. It makes him feel more important because he's saying, "Oh, look, I'm actually a part of something that people recognize now." It's so cool. So, kind of going beyond stats and experience rewards. I mean, corruption points. What do you think? Do you do anything like this?
When I was playing Dark Heresy, I had a whole bunch of NPCs, and they're all on the ship. And every single one of the NPCs more or less mirrored a PC because none of them really knew 40K, none of them really knew what the class they were meant or how it was supposed to work. So I had these people that were sort of like their mentors to show them how they should be operating. And in that, I made it so that across sessions, they would be able to talk to any given person about any given thing that they're interested in out of game, out of actual interests, right? So I had a cleric who was like, I'm really interested in hating aliens. How do I hate aliens more? And then his mentor was like, oh, I know what you can do with that, and like blah blah blah. But it all turned into like the hatred Xenos talent, you know what I mean? Which wasn't really in his tree for a really long time. But it like through that cool role play, through that expenditure of experiences with that character, nothing to do with spending the XP, just with that character, I was allowed to give him something that he liked, and also allowed him to grow over the relationship with the NPC in the way that they would be able to talk to each other and like figure things out. And that's just one player out of the five that I had all doing the same thing. And it came to the point where I got really tricky with it. It was I would have like one player who's a scum and another player who's an assassin, and the scum would say, "How do I get better at fighting close combat?" And his guy would say, "Well, go talk to the assassin and the girl he's been talking to." And then I got to like put players together and sort of buddy cop them mechanically, which is really really cool. They think of it like Mass Effect, And you said this before, Fox. When you have when you're talking to characters and you're doing their loyalty missions, you
Yeah.
can take one of their skills. I like
Right.
that.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you've done stuff like that with the past. What would you say to anyone who's possibly going to be doing this in their games?
So there's two ways to really reward players for role playing well, right? The first is literally rewarding them for role playing well. You can say like, "Oh, you did a great job today. Like, I really like that tension that you brought forth. I really like the conflict that you resolved. Have some extra experience." Ba boom. But that often makes players feel like they did not do well enough if it keeps going on and the same person keeps getting the reward, right? And that's a whole other story. But the second way you can do this is rewarding the narrativist version of it. So if you have a player that is role playing in a way that makes them want to learn more, every player in the
Mhm.
game, if you are a player, likes to see numbers go up. You also like to see gaining abilities and becoming stronger. That's the point of going from level 1 to level whatever. And I think that just by talking about your character in your game, you as a GM can lend those talents, those abilities, those experiences, not points, but uh, tangible things to allow them to get that and to move on and become stronger. So allow them to talk, and then listen is the two things you need to do.
Right. Um, I don't usually like to give extra XP as a reward. That's something I do for team efforts. So, for example, in the second game I had, the main quest was to figure out what happened to an acolyte in the Bright College. But there was also a side mission where there was a monster that was kind of running around town, and they killed the monster. There was a gold reward, but then at the end, I said, well, I was only planning to give you 2 XP, but you went out of your way and you solved a second problem, so here's an extra experience point as well, type thing. I don't after the game. I'm not like you role played well, have an extra 500 experience. You know what I mean? I think that can get a little unfair. I more or less like to kind of just kind of sit in the corner. We talked about learn. After a game, listen to your players talk and what they liked and what they didn't like and how that's possibly the most important thing a new GM can do. I still like to do that kind of thing, and I'm listening to them. I'm listening to what they want with their character and stuff like that, and I'll come up with some really interesting things for them and stuff like that. And if it's something I sometimes ask for their like I kind of go up to them and I'm like, so do you want to tell me about what you said about this or whatever? And they're like, oh yeah, I want kind of like an interesting animal companion. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then they next game they'll encounter like a talking bird or something like that who has some sort of goal that they want to accomplish, and then the bird is kind of like, you know what, I like you. I'm gonna hang out with you for a bit. Maybe not be there every game, but yeah. So RP rewards are nice. Do you sometimes reward maybe an item or something like that?
So yeah, this is this is great for advanced GMing. I was very very top heavy the first time I played Dark Heresy because I didn't understand how balance worked throughout the game. So I was giving players like all sorts of stuff. And because I thought, like, oh, you did great today. Sure, you can totally have that heavy bolter. And then I didn't realize exactly how much damage a heavy bolter would do. So I had to like write in ways for the heavy bolter to get lost, and then Metroid, like, you trip on a sewer and now all of your stuff is gone. So yes, I do. I think that items are very very cool, but I want to bring that back to an older concept in that I don't think you should ever give a player a whole item, right? I don't think you should ever give a specific player, a full item. I think you should give them a specific piece of a specific item. And I'm just going to bring this back to Weapons of Legacy. If I have a piece of a shaft of a sword that's like the world slaying sword of evil slaying +5, then I'm going to make you with your party look for the rest of the pieces. You know what I mean? I don't think, and I will do that absolutely through discussion, through role playing outside of the story, because I think that giving them something to actively work towards while trying to work towards their main goal is really cool for tensions, really cool for conflict, and really cool for how much you do when the world's at stake, or how much you do when you want cool stuff. So yeah, I would, to conclude, I don't think that giving people full heavy bolters is a good idea anymore, but I would totally give them the barrel.
Right, definitely. And I mean, I generally try to stay away from items as well, because sometimes, yeah, if you have two characters that are archers, it's like, well, you get a magic bow. you know what happens then, who deserves it, kind of thing. But I mean, if there's an item like a player really wants, like for example, if a person really wanted to be a pistolier type thing, but they're like, man, pistols are just so expensive, I might just be like, okay, well, if you want to be a pistolier, you like when a noble like donates like his old pistol or whatever, and pistols are pretty powerful items, so maybe I would give it like it's like old or something, and you have to repair it to make it do full damage or something. But again, more of a role playing reward than saying, oh well, here you go, here's a pistol, go shoot like chaos warriors in the face.
Now here's some advanced jamming, right? As after all, this is corruption points, so you have to do it in a way. I usually have to do it in a way that adds party tension. So I one time had a group of players in D&D where one of the players had this magical bow, and he really loved this bow. He's all about this bow, and is like his only thing is like life choice. And I had another player with a magical tattoo that wanted to be the only magical item in the universe. So I had that tattoo constantly talk to his player and be like, dude, got to get rid of that bow. That bow's got to go. Right? And so he's like, all right, all right, all right, all right. So there was a gelatinous cube that stripped the dude of all of his stuff, right? And then all of his stuff like came off, and his bow was part of that gelatinous cube, and he's like a naked person lying on the floor now because that's how gelatinous cubes work. And I had the player with the tattoo grab the bow, right? Run off, break the bow in half, and then like run into a nearby shop a couple towns later, and then pick up the pieces of the broken bow and say he bought it from the shopkeeper to the guy that lost his bow. He's like, dude, your bow. I'm so sorry.
That's
So
that's evil.
I like being mean, and I like when players are mean too. So it's you can
Totally not conflicting with what we said earlier.
no, this is all in character, in character. So it's a matter of it's not just like giving players stuff, but give them stuff that makes them want to do things, right? Give them stuff that makes them want to be the best, or give them stuff that makes them want to only be the one, or give them stuff that makes them want to mess with other players, right? Not every magical item is good.
Right, right. So yeah. Any final words on that? Before we move to our next topic, because I realize we're almost a half hour in. We're just like halfway through.
No, let's scoot on to
All right, it's NPC rewards, right?
we kind of touched on that.
Yeah, we kind of touched on that, but I guess let's touch up a bit further. Um, do you like having NPCs usually around who players can interact with outside a game, kind of thing, and they get some sort of reward? Like, what are your uses of complex NPCs?
I love NPCs. I am a character writer first, and everything else second. I will very often make complex NPCs the focus of my campaigns, and I like to see them grow with the PCs. I like to see when you're at the end of that campaign and I kill someone off, and players start to actually get sad. I think that's my bread and butter. I like drinking those tears. Um, it, and no, in a more serious manner, right? I think that NPCs, complex NPCs, growing NPCs, changeable, malleable NPCs, are again something only this game can do, only this hobby can do. When you have a game like a video game, you know that the NPCs have one set story. No matter what happens or how you do it, that story is going to begin and end in a specific way. Whereas in tabletop, they can have a million stories. They can turn left instead of right at any given time. And I love influencing that. I love my players encouraging that. And for that reason, I'll have very often too many NPCs, and I'll start killing them off one by one, or one goes missing, or one disappears, and things like that. But for the main ones, the major NPCs, they're going to stick around for like 2 to 3 seasons, and then I'm going to kill them right at season 3.
Nice, nice. Um, Yeah, NPCs are honestly, I only use them very sparingly, if I'm honest, because I like to make it about kind of the player stories. If they're beginners, I might have an NPC companion with them, just kind of so they can be like, well, what do we do? And then I can be like, well, it kind of represents me in the game where I could be like, well, we know this, this, and this. Oops, excuse me. We could we could try this, this, or this kind of thing if the players are scratching their head. So I like using them for new players. For this grand campaign that I'm writing, for those of you who don't know, I've been kind of live streaming our games and all that. But I was thinking for this grand campaign I'm doing, I'm going to do a handful of NPCs that kind of players can interact. They can almost take like a companion again, kind of like Mass Effect, I guess, the easiest thing. And based on who they take from their party, from the choice of NPCs they have, I'll use the Empire Merchant. He has a chance of giving them discounts. He has friends in low places. Since he's a brilliant merchant, so of course he cheats to win. And he's also a coward, and he's also very weak, so he's almost next to useless in combat. And party suffers a -1 intimidation modifier because he's just so jumpy, and it makes everyone really kind of uneasy. So I like also maybe giving him some sort of passive perks as well. We also talked about skill gaining. The Bretonian knight, who's also another companion, he's going to be able to teach them ride. And again, one of those skills that isn't going to be game breaking because no one thinks like, man, I want to be really good at riding a horse. You know what I mean? I don't think when people make their character, unless they're specifically being a knight or something, like an actual knight who's actually on a lance and shield, not just a warrior in full plate. You know, it can be an interesting way to have the players kind of work together or think how they can interact with the world, and it's a whole new thing. So, anything else to say about that?
No, I hope I've touched on this enough. The last whole portion. I like to mirror my PCs with my NPCs. I like to give them like so if you're a rogue, right? I like to give you a rogue that's sort of like here's something you could be, or a person that you could be like, or a person you can completely choose to not be like, right? And I think that really allows players to see themselves in the future and see themselves in something else in the game, and then moving on to or moving away from that, or taking aspects of it and moving away, right? So if you're a rogue and I want to make a rogue that's like level 8 and you're level 1, I want to show you, hey, you're level 8, you can be just like this guy with these motivations, with these backstories, with this stuff on them, and you can set yourself up to go that way, or you can set yourself up to not go that way. And even like in that binary choice, in that incredibly small microcosm of a example, you have a player that can completely choose to change their character on that, or they can choose to go by their own values on another, and then just go and go and go. And who knows, by the time that they're level 8, will they change again, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really cool to have that kind of player empowerment in, here's something you can do, why don't you be your own thing?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of cool. That's actually something I've kind of never thought about, but it's almost like when you're playing a video game like I don't know, Final Fantasy VII, for example, and you have that one guy who's in your party who's like insanely powerful, and that's what you're going to be like at level 60 or whatever, and you're like level 1, and you're like hitting for like 2 damage, and then he hits for like 9,999, and it's like, oh my god, I want to be that person. So it's kind of cool. I definitely like that, and I'll possibly use that in the future because I think that's a pretty cool idea. So our last topic of advanced jamming is encounter balance on the fly. Do you want to?
I'll take the lead.
Yeah, you just slam. What did you even slam down?
I'm slamming my post-it with all of our notes on it.
Lay down the hammer.
Laying it down. The encounter balance is interesting, right? When you're making an encounter, you can think about what might happen with the players, but you can also, like, anything is possible. Anything is possible. And it may be, you can go by challenge ratings, you can go by experience gained, you can go by how tough they've fought before, right? And it comes down to like specific encounters. Everything can change at any given time. Don't be afraid to change it. The books, the Dungeons and Dragons books, are kind of awful about this, especially, right? Because it'll say like a level 4 encounter is these 17 mobs. You're fine. And that's not true at all, right? I don't know what level 4 encounter for what groups or how tactics they have or what optimization they've chosen, but it's miserable, right? That's not works. That is not how it works. When it comes to encounter balancing, it's very much I go by three like main things. It's one, have them fight something they've already fought. Two, have them fight something they've never fought before. And three, make sure you put environment in it, right? That way, if you have them fight something that they've already fought, you can, and you have like five, let's call them thugs. You have five thugs, and they've already fought them before. They know exactly what they're supposed to do and how they react. You can increase that number or decrease that number based on how much the encounter is going, how difficult it seems to be, or how interesting it seems to be. And then if you introduce them something else, like a thug with armor, and then that thug with armor is like tougher and he's harder to get through and things like that, right? You can add more thugs with armor or take away more thugs with armor, and you can move that on throughout time and balancing your encounters that way. And with adding environment into it adds any amount of oh crap, what do we do now, right? I've said this before. This was actually a long time ago on Corruption Points. One of my first posts was about having a chandelier. I like the idea of having a chandelier. And what that means is like you're in a fight and you're surrounded by dudes with swords and you're Robin Hood and you know you're gonna lose, but suddenly you realize there's a rope in the corner, and if you cut that, the chandelier will come down and everyone will get crushed. I love those. I love those so much. I use them a little bit too much in 4th edition.
Now I can just picture you DMing. It's like, oh god, the wolves are surrounding us. It's like, is that a chandelier attached to that tree? Yes, it is.
Look there, a chandelier, right? Because when encounters are going south and your players might not be able to just do it with their abilities or their at-wills or their swords and shields or their magic, right? And they realize they need a little bit more. If you have that chandelier waiting for them, you're encouraging creativity, you're encouraging good role play, you're encouraging using the environment to their advantage, and most of all, most important, you're encouraging awesome things and stories, right? It'll always be, hey, remember that time I cut that chandelier and we killed those 7 dudes? That was amazing! And that's the point of encounters.
Right. So, I guess one thing I'll say, because I've been playing Savage Worlds. I play, I guess, to an extent, somewhat different RP games when you're more about the tactics and all that stuff. When I'm playing, because there are sometimes I come across parties who aren't fighters at all. They're all just persuasive aristocrats and bureaucrats and politicians and stuff like that. And it's just like, how do you encounter a fight? Because dude with dagger will probably beat them with dagger. You know what I mean? It's not even like they're fighting Chaos Marauders. It's just guy with sword still has a pretty good chance to beat them with. And that's to an extent you have to always pre-think your encounters pretty bad. You have to consider what's in your party, as you said earlier, and I think a rule of thumb is to generally try to undershoot difficulty than it is to overshoot, because in the fine balance of things, if people are just kind of frustrated that in a straight up fight, and they're losing throughout the whole thing, it can be a little frustrating. So, I mean, is that something you do when you create encounters? Do you always undershoot kind of versus overshoot?
Yes and no. So yes, I usually undershoot by the amount of enemies that are in it, like the literal number of enemies that are in the fight.
Right.
But no, in that I like to make every encounter something special, right? And usually this turns out to be like making it so much harder. But when it comes to an encounter, I hate dudes in a box shooting at you while you shoot at them in a line. I like I like when thunder is crashing. I like completely random probability. I love tables, things like that. And when it comes to encounter balance in that way, I'll usually make it so that like here's some things I know how it'll go. Here's some enemies I know what they'll fight like, and then here's something that I have no idea of predicting. So for example, right, I have a dungeon mat, right, which is the squares that you can put minis on and move across, and very often I'll have effects that say, all right, on these 100 squares, right, I'm going to roll a d100, and that's where lightning is going to strike this turn. And if you're standing under it, it sucks to be you, but you can maybe push and slide the enemies under it, and then hope it sucks to be them, right, and things like that. So I tend to overshoot with my creativity in the encounter environment. I tend to undershoot with the literal people that are in it.
Yep. And actually, the God of Nothing actually brings up a pretty interesting thing is overshoot, but have the enemies pull their punches. That's kind of an interesting thing is if the players are retreating or whatever, they've all kind of fallen back and stuff like that, and the encounter seems tough. You can have like the thug leader come out, and he pushes his people aside, and he's laughing ha ha, and then the players get like a free shot on him or something like that. That's another creative way.
Yeah,
But
we're gonna catch some flack for this, but I'm gonna say it again. You can always lie about your dice.
you can't always lie about your dice, and that's something that has happened before. I think the best time I've ever accidentally overshot and I've made up for it was during a grand campaign that took place in Kermi, which for those of you who don't know, it's the Tomb King setting of Warhammer Fantasy, and they were fighting a ton of night goblins. Like I literally for miniatures, I bought a box of Skull Pass just to use all like 70 goblins in that fight, and they killed one of the players, and instead of coup de graceing him, the war boss is just like kick him, and there's like all these goblins are just like kicking him while he's down and stuff like that. And it was kind of funny, and then it gave players time to recuperate, even though the person's at 0 life and they're getting kicked. I'm not going to kill them though, because it was kind of my fault for overshooting it, and then ended up I was just like. But then here's another example is what happens when the fight just all their dice rolling is horrible, and they know they're doing horrible. It's not their fault. It's no one's fault. The dice is just being cruel to them. Do you ever come with complete asinine ideas with how it works? Like for example, they still weren't making comebacks. The dice just weren't kind to them, and they were actually doing their rolls for this. And eventually it was just because they were fighting in a Tomb King's Crypt, and I was like, you know what, screw it. A Tomb Scorpion comes out and, starts unleashing hell, and, it comes behind the Night Goblin, so they're going to be fighting that.
Yeah, and if I can interrupt you for a moment, it's very much a matter of wearing multiple hats. If you have a group of goblins that are looting a tomb, what makes you think they want to kill you? They just want to loot that tomb. You're now in the way, right? So if you're stabbing all these players and the players are like incapacitated or obviously weakened, if I'm a goblin, I'm gonna run away. Killing you does me nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I need to just get the stuff I came here for and leave. I'm a goblin, right? Not every enemy in the universe wants to kill you.
Right. So, what was I gonna say? I had something to say to that, but wow, my brain. But yeah, it's sometimes it just happens, and you need to adjust it. Man, I had something to say. I at least need to have one brain fart per show, right? one brain fart per show, and this is what. So let me ask you a question. Let's say it's that encounter, and it's really unlucky. Like this is just a normal encounter. It's not really anything super specific for the story. Would you ever just let your players die? And just say campaign's over on this irrelevant fight?
No, I think that death is important, and I think that death is meaningful, and it is incredibly purposeful, and I think that death is very, very permanent. Right? This is not a comic book death, right? If Batman dies, he's not coming back in 12 issues. This is like your character is your character, and if your character has died, it better have been for a good reason. And whether that reason is you guys are super dumb, or like you decide to sacrifice yourself to save the team, or any amount of these things, right? It has to be for a reason. It has to be purposeful. It can never be just like, well, you're dead. On to the next session.
Yeah.
AD&D did that. That's AD&D syndrome. You know what I mean? Like, oh, everyone's level 1. I'm a level 1 wizard named Noki. And like, oh, he's dead. All right, now I'm a level 1 wizard named Moki.
Yeah.
Oh, he's dead too.
Yep. Kind of thing. And then again that Night Goblin thing, that wasn't like a super big story into it, but I remember one of my players asked like what would have happened if we died, and I was, thinking to myself, I was like, well, I kind of wasn't expecting to have this much hard time, but of course something in my head clicked. I was like, I probably would have just had them like capture you, and like you guys had a chance to recover and escape. You would have no idea where you'd be, and you'd be in the middle of the desert. You'd be kind of screwed, but you would have a chance to kind of fight back. So
I would much rather cripple and entrap and force a player into an unsavory situation than kill them.
Right.
I think that's a better story.
Right, because even though, and also sometimes the dice aren't kind, and it can get them into a whole other situation, kind of thing. So I mean, and again, sometimes people are role playing characters, and it could be kind of like think of the Hobbit. When the dwarves are fighting the trolls or whatever, they fail the battle, but then Bilbo Baggins passes every single one of his charisma checks.
Yeah, right.
and saves them. So that's probably my key example on that. So
With that, we're hitting what, 45? I think we should wrap.
yeah, I was just about to say any final things on encounters.
No, there are tons and tons and tons of resources, myself included. If you're ever looking for specific ideas about encounters or specific relevant links and stuff like that, just come talk to me. Send me a message on Tumblr, corruptionpoints.tumblr.com, and I can absolutely lead you to the right person. If it wasn't me, I link you to a billion people. I know some awesome people talking about this.
Right, definitely. So yeah, we will probably be back for post-show chat since you guys have been awesome. And thank you for watching, and we will see you next Monday.
Thank you so much, guys.